Hello, everyone. A warm welcome from us, and very excited to have you. My name is Lobis Mabatilein, and together with my colleague Amir Masoud, can you everybody hear me? This always happens.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it's strange. It's very, yeah. I always feel that I'm getting kicked out. Anyway, let me start again.
You're here, Lobis.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Lois Mabatilein, and together with my colleague Amir Masoud, we would like to welcome you in the name of the Goethe-Institut to this 5th food feature under the title Food Design for Businesses. For those who don't know the Goethe-Institut, it is the Cultural Institute of the Federal Republic of Germany. This program is part of the global project Culture and Creative Industries, and on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, the GIZ, and the Goethe-Institut promote the emerging market of culture and creative industries. The Food Features are a series of weekly talks that focus on different aspects surrounding the topic of food design. It is the first core program of our FoodFaBRIK, an extensive program which seeks to encourage the development of practical and theoretical knowledge about the emerging discipline of food design as part of the creative industries. For more details on the FoodFaBRIK as well as the Food Features, you can go to our website on Goethe-Institut /Jordan/FoodFaBRIK. So without further delay, I would like to introduce Aya Shaban, the moderator for the series and all of the series so far. Aya Shaban is a food designer and architect. She's also the founder of the pioneering food and lifestyle brand Nemliye that focused on traditional farming and wild ingredients. She has been in the field for more than 8 years, designing innovative food products and multisensory learning tools that help reshape the culture of tomorrow. Welcome, Aya. The microphone and screen are yours.
Thank you, Lovis. Hi, everyone. My name is Aya. I'm an architect and a food designer based in Amman. Very glad to be moderating this series of talks with exceptional designers and pioneers in the field of food design. Please allow me to bring your attention to a few guidelines before we start. We have around 200 people registered today, so please keep your mics muted for the length of the session. You can type in your questions and comments in the chat throughout the talk. They will be gathered by us, and some of you will be able to ask directly towards the end. In curating the series of food features, it has been important for us to explore the possibilities of merging food and design, taking deep dives into the field. We seek to answer questions like, how could we seize opportunities and overcome challenges through incorporating design tools and thinking? And can we really shape the future through food design? Our topic today is food design and business. We will take a journey through the different areas of operation and business practices, exploring how that reflects on the health and livelihood of the planet. Many of us reflect, at least occasionally, on how our daily choices have a ripple effect that reaches far and wide. We regret that most of our food comes in plastic packaging that ends up in the soil and the oceans. Sometimes we feel tremendously guilty, but common practice with the pull of convention is oftentimes stronger than all of these feelings. However, in recent years, there has been a shift in value perception. People are seeking to become more mindful and proactive, putting their money in businesses that are adopting sound practices to reduce the negative impact on people and the planet. So how does food design thinking in this context capitalize on the rising consumer awareness? How can it lead to meaningful social and environmental impact? And what are the tools that could pave the way forward? Our lovely guest today will shed light onto the untapped potential that lies in thinking and rethinking business practices, creating models and ideas that can act as the engine for change towards a more sustainable future, environmentally, socially, and economically. Dr. Francesca Zampollo was able to foresee the need for food design thinking and dedicates her life's work to develop tools, methods, and systems leading innovation towards new meanings and functions. She is the founder of the online school of food design, helping food designers, innovators, and companies to achieve propositions that are innovative, meaningful, and sustainable. Today's talk will be quite different. We will be asking you a few questions as we go through, and so a pop-up window will appear on your screens and you get to choose your answer. The idea is not to overthink it, just answer with your intuition. We can start with the first question now, and we'll take it from there. And without further ado, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Francesca. The mic and screen are yours. Oh, you're muted, Dr. Francesca.
Excellent. Okay, so hi everybody again. So I'm just going to, I'm sharing my screen so I can look at this and you guys can keep answering this poll, and maybe Aya, you can close it in a moment or so, in a minute or so. Well, firstly, thank you to Amir and Lovis for inviting me to this lovely series of to this event, to this series of talks, and it's really a privilege to be part of it. And so tonight, my goal here is to talk a little bit about food design for business, as the title says. Very simply, I do not have a business background, I have a design background. So I won't be talking anything business is, because that's not my knowledge. But I will try and talk about food design as if I were talking to people who have an interest in starting some type of food business, or to people who are already operating in some type of food business. So the only couple of things that I'm going to say about the business is this, and it's a recap. It's recapped in this slide. Sorry, my earpods are bugging me. So, what are food businesses? Well, this very scientific source, Wikipedia, because that is how businesses I am going to be tonight, tells us that these are basically the food businesses that we can, all the list of possible food businesses we could be operating within. And as you can see, it's a lot of stuff. And basically, the only thing that is not food business is, let me put this somewhere else, are subsistence farmers, those who survive on what they grow, and hunter-gatherers. And these are the only, let's say, sectors that can be considered as not in the food industry, so not a food business. So we talk about food business anyway, anytime there is some type of exchange, not necessarily economical exchange, between people or groups of people or whatever type of entity. So that is all the business that basically I'm going to talk about. But on the other hand, what I want to do now is to start talking about food design. And so, you know, usually the question that I have is, first, immediately, is what is food design? Sorry, let me just, I have to move because I want to remove this. Okay, it was blocking my screen. Okay, so the first question usually becomes, well, what is food design? Now, this audience tonight is quite a knowledgeable audience. So my objective is not really to tell you what food design is. On the other hand, my objective is to share with you what I see when I think about the term food design. This is food design. I'm kidding. I'm completely kidding. This is not food design. This is the best example that I can possibly show you to remark on what is not food design. So this is not food design. One definition that I have for food design, one definition that I like to give is the food design is the design process that brings innovation on anything that has to do with food or eating, like dishes, food products, food services, food events, or food systems. So food design is something that brings to innovation. I don't think we can talk about food design or design in general, really, if we are not seeing some type of innovation, some type of improvement to people's lives or to the planet. So these, I made my point. And the other important thing is that food design is a design process. It's not really an object or an outcome. For me, food design is a design process. So if you think about starting a process where in the very beginning you have no idea what you're going to design, or you have some type of brief, more or less detailed on what you're going to design. And on the other hand, you will get to a point where your product is available on the market or your service opens its doors. All of this is food design to me. So we asked you a question a moment ago. We asked you to tell us what you think food design is. And so I am very curious. We did that because I'm very curious to see what the answer was. And I just shared with us the answer that you guys gave. And so let's see. Most people said curating the space and experiences, developing new food systems, creating new tableware and cutlery only 1%, okay? Designing menus and recipes, or color, texture, and form. Well, so the reason why I want to ask you this is, first of all, it tells me what type of audience I have in front of me. And so I see that I have a lot of people interested in events, spaces and experiences, and in food systems, which is excellent. Also excellent for the type of content that I have for you. It also tells me that you guys don't really think that food design is new tableware or cutlery. Great. But what is the real answer to this question? Well, I wish I knew. To me, this is the most difficult question to answer in our field, because the answer is huge. And that's because food design is huge. I think there can be as many definitions of food design as there are people giving a definition, right? As with all definitions. Sorry, I'll just remove that. Okay. So one way, what I want to do tonight is to show you what I see when I think about food design. And I will try and always do it by showing you examples of food businesses that are bringing some type of innovation. So the first example that I want to give you is these guys. These are Mimic Seafood, and they are making vegan sushi. This sushi is, sorry guys, I'm just letting you know that there is someone with their mic on, and I do not think it is my mic making this noise, but I'm not sure. It's fine, by the way, anyway. These guys are making vegan sushi, and they actually are using a whole piece of tomato. And they are flavoring and processing the whole piece of tomato to make this fake sushi, if you want. So what we see here is an example of a food product. And this is the first, what I call food design subdiscipline. This happens when food product design happens when we are designing something edible that is meant for mass production. And another example that I like is Good Spread. So this company makes peanut butter, and for every jar of peanut butter that they sell, they create and distribute one MENA, or fortified peanut butter, which is a nutritionally fortified version of peanut butter that is given to children with the term escapes me, with nutrition deficiencies of some type. And so this is another example, as you can see, of food product design. We have an edible product that is meant for mass production. Who is the food designer here? Well, we call them food product designers, but often they can be, let's say, regular product designers or general product designers that for some reason end up operating in the world of food, designing food. Another example that I want to give you here is our friend Marty Gixey. You saw him a few weeks ago. He was the first speaker of this series. And this project that he made for Alessi, so the company that produces this is Alessi, I'm sure he might have spoken to you about it. And I think I like this project because it talks about the importance of considering seeds as softwares in a way, full of information. And instead of just discarding them and throwing them away, we should care for seeds in a way, given what they give to us. And these type of products, as you can see, these are products for food. They are designed for food. So we call these, as part of the food science subdiscipline, that we call design for food. So another example is Leila. You saw her, I think, 2 weeks ago, and she gave you examples of one of the things that she has made is a series of tableware, in fact, where that she has designed focusing on results from a branch of research that is called gastrophysics by researchers like Professor Charles Spence, who was speaking with him. So we are seeing him here at a series of tableware that is designed on the intricate connection between stimuli that arrive to our senses and the actual eating experience that we have. And in general, any type of tableware, eating utensils, or package, or pots and pans and packaging, we call this design for food. So in design for food, we have all the products that are not edible, of course, and they are meant to cut, contain, cook, and store, and package food. So you see there is a connection here between food product design and design for food, because in the case of packaging, for example, these two disciplines go hand in hand, which means that we have some type of collaboration. So if you have a packaged food, for example, you will end up having, most likely, a collaboration between food product designer, a product designer who designs maybe the packaging, and maybe even a graphic designer who is designing the graphic for the packaging, for example. And I want to bring your attention, I will keep bringing your attention on this aspect of collaboration, which is essential within the food design discipline. Another example that I want to give you is this soup. This is a soup titled The Soup, and it's by the very famous chef Ferran Adrià. You might have seen this example as well. What happens, what this is a dish really, and we call this design with food. This is what, this type of things, designing the food itself, is what chefs and food scientists do, because they design the edible product. They design the food itself, its consistency, its flavors, it's the way it looks like, colors, etc. So often here we have a collaboration between chefs and scientists, or in general, the people who are operating within this specific area of food design are chefs and scientists. So we saw an example from a chef before. This might be a good example from a food scientist. So this is Impossible Burger. The food business is a food production business, and you might have heard, for sure you will have seen of it, and it's the same as, it's very similar to Beyond Meat, I think, or Beyond Burgers, very similar. So what we have here is a completely plant-based meat replacement. This is an example of a product, the not meat patty itself, that was designed, that was created by a food scientist, because they have come up with the ingredients and the recipe and the components in a way to make this meat patty look like meat as much as possible, and some even say taste like meat as well. And on the same line, we had another company who is making another type of non-meat, if you will, but this meat is made from cow cells. They take cells from healthy cows. The cows do not get killed, and this type of product is created. So you see here, the designer is really a food scientist. And then we moved into another space, yes, of another food design subdiscipline that I call food space design. And in this case here, the food business is usually a food design studio or an architecture studio or an interior design studio. And this food design subdiscipline, I think it's interesting because it's one of those that gets very much ignored by the glossy magazines that talk about food design. But instead, it is of a fundamental importance because it is, they are designing here the space where eating happens or cooking happens. So they are designing something that influences every eating experience in the world. One example we have here from Salvage Supper Club, these were a series of dinners designed around the concept of food waste. The menu was designed with food waste itself. And the space that was created for this particular events was actually a repurposed food waste, a dumpster where food waste would have ended up. So what I think is interesting, we have had many examples of events around the topic of food waste, which is brilliant. I want to use this as an example because the food space here was specifically designed for the event itself. So here there was for sure a food space designer. And another example that I want to give you is the ice restaurant. There are also ice bars around the world, but this is the actual ice restaurant. I think there are 2 or 3 or 4 maybe around the world now. This one is from Finnish Lapland, and it's a whole restaurant made entirely of ice. The whole building is just ice, whereas the ice bars that you can find around the world is a normal building, it's a normal room that is very cold and a bit of ice inside. So this ice restaurant is a full building made entirely of ice. That gives you, and as you can see, the eating space here gives you a very specific type of experience. Now, what I like about this project, I love this restaurant, is that it's made in what is it, maybe come November or something, the designers, the architects go to the river, cut cubes of ice, they bring it to the space, and they start building the restaurant. And when it's April or November, the restaurant starts melting and it transforms itself into water and it goes back into the river. So this is an example of a space that exists in that shape only for a few months of the year. And these pictures are actually horrible, I realize that, and they are horrible because I took them myself. I have been there and it was one of the best experiences of my life. I've never worn so many clothes and it was awesome. And yes, there is a fire extinguisher in a restaurant made completely by ice, because that is just human beings and you know how we like to regulate everything, even things that make no sense. So this is an example of food space design that I wanted to give you. There's another type of food business that we can talk about are all food catering and food studios. And this lovely lady here is Maria Vogelsang, whom I believe you're going to meet next week. She's going to be the talk number 6. And I like to always talk about her and what she does because, I mean, she's the best and we all know her. And this particular event that she has organized, she calls it the Christmas dinner, the white dinner. And I believe she's going to talk to you about it next week, but just to give you a little bit of a context on why we should talk about her in the context of what I'm telling you. Let's say that this dinner was designed as a way for people to share the moment of a Christmas dinner. And I remember her telling me that for her, Christmas dinners are about being all the same and kind of being on the same level. So this huge tablecloth covers people's clothes and, you know, jewelry. So when you are inside this tablecloth, you're all the same. And then I will give you a little spoiler telling you that you see that on the picture on the right, there is a plate that is divided in two halves. I'm gonna say just stay tuned for that, and I'm gonna let her tell you about it and the reason why that plate is split in half. This type of businesses, this type of design, this type of food design, we call it eating design. And actually it was Malaya Bogelsan who created this term first, because she said something on the line of, food is already perfectly designed by nature, I only design the act of eating. And so she started using the term eating design. And so now we use the term eating design when somebody is designing an event. So when somebody gets to design the entire eating situation. And that is usually what happens with food caterers or food design studios. And the example of Salvage Supper Club, yes, we mentioned it as an example of food space design, but as you can see, since it is an event, we can also talk about it as an example of eating design. And I show you these examples twice because what we usually design is never just, what we usually do within food design is never just one thing, but there is a beautiful intersection with other subdisciplines. And there is always an intersection between our work and somebody else's work. There is always some type of cooperation. So in designing a food event, you will have chefs working with food design, product designers who maybe are going to design bespoke vessels, plates. You might have a food space designer. You might end up collaborating with a musician because you want a specific type of music for your event, etc. And then it's the turn for to discuss food services as a type of food business. And the first one that I want to talk about are pizzerias, because I mean, I have to let you in on a little bit of a secret. Well, it's not a secret, everybody knows. I am a little bit obsessed with pizza. Like, I just love them. I mean, look at this picture. They just make me happy. And I think they are the most beautiful thing ever invented. So I wanted to talk about pizzerias because they are a brilliant example of food services. Okay, of course, there are lots of types of pizzerias, and some are very average and some are a little bit less average. And one example that I want to give you is something called Cencio la Parolaccia, which is a pizzeria in Rome, Italy. And what happens in this pizzeria is that when you go in as a customer, the waiters insult you. And they use a lot of very colorful swear words, which is the word parolaccia, and they just insult customers. So what they have created here is a complete shift in paradigm between, you know, the customer being revered as, you know, the customer is always right, and we have to throw red carpet where the customers walk. Here is the complete opposite. Here you go in not really for the pizza that much, but for the experience, for the atmosphere that they create. And the more customers talk back at waiters, the more waiters insult customers. But they always end up at the end of the dinner all very happy and hugging each other. And this is just a picture from TripAdvisor. I mean, look at them, the picture on the right. They're all stereotypically Italian, don't they? This could be my cousin. They all look perfectly Italian, and that's just, I mean, I think to me it's like just a great example of a pizzeria that you could find in Italy. And if you don't believe me that this exists, this is their TripAdvisor page. They are there, and it's actually a 4 dots on 5 out of 5. So that's quite all right. When we talk about food services, of course, there are many types of food services besides pizzerias, which may remain for me the most important. We have cafes, restaurants, food trucks, supermarkets, food stalls, and bakeries. And I want to talk about food stalls and supermarket a little bit and give you a couple of examples of those, because I feel they are the most ignored. I could give you a lot of examples of great restaurants, but you know all about those. I'm more interested in giving you some examples of food stalls and supermarkets. The food stall that I wanted to give you as an example is Liberty Kitchen in London. What you can find here is a menu called Ball No Chain, where you have meat, fish, veggies, and vegan street ball recipes created, made, and sold by prisoners and ex-prisoners. And what I like is that through this program, they are celebrating London's diversity, and they are giving these people skills as well as the option of a job and future support on living. And what I think is also very interesting is that the menu, this Ball No Chain menu, is designed by a chef, but really then co-designed with the employees really in the program. And then I want to talk about supermarkets, because they are probably the last thing that a young entrepreneur would think of when starting, if faced with the option of starting a food business, right? I can almost hear some of you saying, what, starting a supermarket? Why should I ever start a supermarket? And I would agree with you, until you can see that actually food supermarket can become something quite interesting. This was the first zero packaging supermarket, I think the first, or one of the first, and it opened in Berlin quite a few years ago. And then, of course, focusing on no packaging and reusable packaging alternatives. And another example is the Real Junk Food Project. I think it's Leeds, UK, or maybe London, I'm not sure, maybe Leeds. This supermarket sells out-of-date food, or food that would otherwise be wasted. And the business model is very simple: pay as you feel. So these guys rescue this food, they make it available, and you can pay as much as you want. And you see, this guy is perfectly happy. Supermarkets do not have to be a boring business opportunity. They can actually be quite fun and quite impactful. So all of these examples are of food services, create what we call food service design. And we talked about the ice restaurant as an example of food space design, but since it is a restaurant, we can indeed talk about food service design. So see that very often when we are doing when we are operating within one area of food design, we are actually operating within other areas as well. So what I would like to do now is to ask you a question. And I think Aya can send the question whenever she is ready. What kind of food design do you think is done at Liberty Kitchen? So the options are design with food, food space design, food design for social sustainability, and eating design. And I have to maybe go here. Okay. And I'm going to wait for a moment to hear your answer, to see your answers, and I actually see them appearing. I don't know if you all see, but so in a moment when we are going to arbitrarily decide that this was enough time, we're going to see what you guys answered. So from, what I have told you about the Liberty Kitchen, what do you think, what type of food design do you think is done here? And I think maybe, Aya, we can end the poll. Yeah, great, thank you. So the winner was food design for social sustainability. Some of you have said design with food, some of you have said food space design, and some of you have said eating design. Well, this is actually a very good range of answers. Absolutely, what happened here was designing for social sustainability. And, and let me see if I can put, I have to go back here to move this out. Sorry, just technical things. Okay. It is indeed food design for social sustainability because as you have assumed, as we have seen, there is an interest in helping out, other people. But it is also designed with food for sure, because people are designing the food itself. Design with food, as we said, is designing the food itself. And it is about food space design because somebody, whether they know it or not, has designed the food space. And this is a good moment because sometimes design cannot be conscious. Sometimes design can happen unconsciously. So whether this is good design or not, it's a completely other issue. But for sure, we can say that this business offers the opportunity to bring design into the food space. But it is also eating design because you didn't know, because I didn't tell you unless you knew of Liberty Kitchen, but they also they also cater for events when it is required. So they also do eating events. And this is an example again of how one business is never really doing one thing, but has the opportunity of bringing innovation in different areas of what we consider being food design. And it is, of course, also food service design also because it's as a food stall, we consider it a food service. And because of all of these things happening, because we are because we are operating within different food design subdisciplines, there is some type of collaboration. So in this case, we have chefs collaborating for sure with product designers for sure. When it comes to events, there could be, again, musicians, there could be light designers, there could be space designers, interior designers, architects coming in and collaborating with us. The next food design subdiscipline that I wanted to discuss is something I call critical food design. Critical food design comes from the more general critical design, which is a branch of design that was born maybe 15, 20 years ago, I believe. And if you look at the body of work that is done within critical design, it's very easy to see how many of the projects use food. So it was very easy for me to add a subdiscipline called critical food design under the food design umbrella. Critical food design is quite unique because the main goal of designers is not really to sell something or to, make money in some way, but it's really to make people think. The designers here want to make people think. So one of my favorite examples is this series of tableware that the designer cast out of parts of her own body. And she used them to serve this meal. In this event, it was mainly her male friends, colleagues, or strangers. So it was only male people that were eating at this table. And they were literally eating out of parts of her own body. what the designer wants to make us think about in this case is the relationship that happens, the interaction that happens when a chef or a food designer designs food for somebody. When the relationship that happens when somebody gives food to somebody else. If you create food and you offer it to somebody, you're offering a part of yourself, because you're offering a part of your creativity, if you will. So she took this metaphor, offering a part of yourself, and made it quite literal, serving these meals on parts of her body. So the purpose of this event is to make us think. And another example, of course, I could not mention our friends Hani and Bunny. You have seen them, I think, 3 weeks ago in this talk series. In this specific example, in this specific performance that they did, they were making us think about the amount of food that is wasted due to food labeling. Now, you could say, well, this is a performance. I think this is actually art. And I could agree with you. But as somebody who has spent a lot of time trying to collect as many definitions of art and design as possible to figure out the border between the two, I answered to this saying that I don't know whether this is art or design. I like to call it design. And if you want to be the one who is going to find the border between art and design, you're welcome to do that. And if you find it, let me know. But these are two disciplines that are very difficult to define because, again, there are as many definitions as people giving definitions. But there are many places where the two interact, where the two kind of connect. And very often critical food design is one of those spaces where, if looked at, could be labeled as art as well. But what is important here is that we have these many and beautiful examples from designers whose sole purpose is to make us think. And that, I think, is the real contribution of this discipline. So all of these examples that I gave you are under the umbrella of what we call critical food design. And with these, we shift into the following food design subdiscipline that I call food system design. And this is where we start having, or at least I start having fun. Have you ever heard of this little project over here, of this little company? Some of you might have, because this is Aya's company. And for those of you who haven't come across the work that she does, with her company, the company makes jams, teas, and honey. And Aya, at any moment that I say something wrong, jump in and correct me. So the company makes jams, teas, and honey. So what to me, though, is even more interesting than the product themselves is the fact that they have put together a web of people where there are about 10 beekeepers, 60 farmers, and 350 foragers. So I wanted to think in terms of a company, of a food business, bringing together all of these people doing all of these different things to create finally a series of products. And I think that what you can see here is that there isn't just the creation or the proposition of a product, but there is the creation or the intervention in a food system. And all of these to bring a message really to people. So what is, and this message, which is shared by all of these hundreds of people collaborating in this project, really, which is way bigger than the products themselves, has to do with locality, with a complex but short supply chain, and with biodiversity. So you have a whole group of people believing in the same principles and operating for the same principles. And out of it, you get a product that if you know nothing about the company, it might look like just a jar of jam. But if you have a chance to learn about the company itself, then you can easily feel, and I use the word feel, how that jar becomes way more than what it actually is. So yes, we have a product, so we are talking about food product design, but because of how this product intervenes in everything around, we are actually talking about food system design. So we can say that what Aya does is she operates within food system design. We could call her a food system designer. So what we usually do when we design products is intervening in the food system. But what these products do, in my personal opinion, what this product did was to create a new food system, because they have brought together all of these different people. Another examples that I wanted to show you is Agropolis. What these guys do is selling and distributing vertical gardens. You can either purchase the vertical garden and they can come in and install it for you, or you can give them space, a piece of land or a rooftop, and they are going to put down the vertical garden, and they can also take care of the growing itself, and they propose some ways to share the produce. So what this company is doing, you see, is creating a product that is because of its existence, creating a little system where it connects people with a little bit of space, people who want to buy food, people who want to eat the food, with the people who want to grow the food, etc. And then, of course, we cannot not mention Anne's work. You saw her last week, I believe, and of all the projects, I mean, many of the projects that she has worked on are absolutely interested, and they talk about food systems, but the one that I want to use here as an example is that of mushroom feed. So mushroom feed are a potential waste product from a food service, from a food business, but it can become the resource, the material for another service. And in this case, I think they are still investigating between using them to create mushroom feed chips or to create a meat replacement type of product. So you see that what happens here is that a circle starts to create. So what is a waste resource from a business becomes the raw material, the potential, something completely necessary for another business. And so we start talking about circularity with this type of projects. And I want to show you here my model for the circular food economy. You might know of the circular economy from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and this model is based on the Ellen MacArthur circular economy model, but I have just visualized it in a way that makes it more immediate for people operating within the food design world. And I don't want to go into it because I believe that many of you are familiar with the concept of a circular economy. But just to say, for those of you who are maybe less familiar, once upon a time, we used to take stuff, make stuff, and dispose of it. Whereas, thankfully, now we are thinking in a way that is more circular. We are starting to design solutions that, instead of creating waste, transform that waste into potentials. And so these materials can go back into the economy, really. And that is where a circle is created. But really, the reason why I wanted to share this with you is because I think that the importance of tools like this one is that, yes, they are useful for us to think in terms of the food waste that we create as a food service or whatever, as a food business of whatever type. And so we can make better choices for how not to create food waste. But, and I think this is overlooked very often, tools like these also can also help us to make choice on the materials that I'm going to choose, on the materials that I'm going to call into my food business. And a very simple example, I make vegan yogurt or vegan yogurt-like products. Am I going to get my, I don't know, coconut milk from somewhere far away, or from somewhere that is closer by, from a company that uses green energy, or somebody who uses non-green energy, etc. So I can use this type of tools, and this is just a stupid example, but I can use this type of tools to make choices on what I'm going to start with, besides what I'm going to do with the waste that I don't want to create. So finally, we get to the last food design subdiscipline that I call sustainable food design. And I don't even really think of it as one food design subdiscipline. I think that sustainability should be the basic philosophy with which we approach anything that we do. But I did visualize it there, because I think it's very important to have it written and to remember that we should design for sustainability. And you know, why do we bother talking about food sustainability? Why is it so important? Or why do I always have to hear people talk about sustainability in anything that we do? Well, every chance I get when I talk to people in these type of scenarios as well, I feel like I have to take a moment to remind us visually of everything that we have done so far, on the problems that we have with regards to food waste, to emissions, what we have done in terms of deforestation to this planet, and what are the causes, the main causes for it. All the rubbish that we create, and the old packaging that is discarded. And remember, for us, that 50% of all packaging is food packaging. And for me, packaging is, it's quite important, because it's I call it one function object. Packaging is the epitome of the stuff that we create that has one function only: packaging that food, containing that food. And some packaging solve that function for a few years, maybe think of a can of beans. But some packaging that we make solves its function for maybe just a few minutes. Think about ice cream cups. We should not forget about the fact about how we have disrupted or influenced the physical health of many other animals with whom we share the planet. We should not forget about the fact that we are basically drinking plastic, all of us, because microplastic has been found in the 83% of tap water samples around the world. And of all the plastics that we create, we only globally recycle about 99.5%, which is, you know, ridiculous. And we have problems with access to clean water, and not to talk about Earth Overshoot Day. So for those of you who have never heard of Earth Overshoot Day, it's the day that is calculated, the day of the year when we basically finish the resources that planet Earth has to give us for that year. And for the past 50 years, since 1970s, so 50 years, about 50 years, for the past 50 years, we have been using more resources than the Earth has to give us. And for, I think, the past 10 years or something, we have been using basically 1 year and a half, sorry, 1 Earth and a half worth of resources, which means that every year we use the resources that 1 planet and a half could give us. If you think about it, it's just mind-blowing. And yes, we are recycling more than previous years, but it doesn't make a lot of sense because we are producing more and more stuff every year. And you might have heard of buy less, buy better, buy local. Well, I think we should start talking about designing less, designing better, and designing local. And I do want to bring your attention on the part design less, because we are designers. Most of us are makers of stuff. We are the people who propose new stuff. And I don't think it's fair to give so much responsibility to the end user. You have to buy less, you have to buy better, you have to buy local. Most people go through their lives being busy about, you know, taking care of their children, paying the mortgage and going to work. And they do the best they can, and they make choices, they make purchasing choices based on their instincts and their values. For us, on the other hand, we, the makers of stuff, we are the one with the information. We are the one who have access to information. So I think the most of the responsibility for how things are looking now on the planet is ours. And for sure, I think that we are the ones who should take our responsibility and design better, design local, and design less, absolutely. And because I want to remind you that even Dieter Rams, who gave us the 10 principles of good design, he said that good design is as little design as possible. Good design is as little design as possible. And these are the 1970s. And he might have been talking only about, you know, stylistic choices and shapes and curves of products. But I think that today we can use this principle in a slightly bigger way, because I think that if we are able to design as little as possible, if we are able for what we design to be unnoticed, when we are able to design for the tangible, material part of our proposition to be as little as possible, I think that is where great design can happen. Going back to Earth Overshoot Day, though, there are good news. Even though since the 90s, as I said, we have been using more resources than the planet has, this year was the first year where we started to postpone that date. So last year, on July 29, we finished the resources that planet Earth had to give us for the whole of 2019. This year, we are doing a little bit better, and the date has moved to August 22nd, which gives us hope, which tells us that we are going in the right direction. Because as many of the projects that I've showed you, there's so many people out there who are doing brilliant things for this planet. So when we talk about sustainability, yes, indeed, we talk about environmental sustainability. And some of the examples that we have seen that respond somehow from one perspective to environmental sustainability are things like mimic food, providing alternatives to animal farming, or a zero waste, zero packaging supermarket, or the Real Junk Food Project, working on food waste specifically. But we also talk about economic sustainability. When we talk about sustainability, there are these three parts. So economic sustainability, you know, it doesn't make any sense to start a business that is going to fail, that will not generate a profit. But then finally, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about social sustainability as well. And this is, I think, one of the parts that is most often ignored when you look at the world of food design in general. Maybe when you look at the world in general, social sustainability is very often ignored. Instead, we have seen as little examples that we saw before, this peanut butter that creates this mana and distributes them to malnourished children. Liberty Kitchen, as you said in the questionnaire yourselves, is an example of social design for social sustainability. But what I think I like the most about this specific visualization of sustainability, which is given to us by Professor Elena Camagnaro in her book, Guests on Earth, is the concept of care. When you are designing for economic sustainability, when I am designing for economic sustainability, I care for me. If I design for social sustainability, I care for me and for you. But when I design for environmental sustainability, I care for all. This implies a fundamental shift. This implies a huge shift from designing for me to designing for us. From designing for the individual to designing for society. And this is something that is happening and that we are seeing more and more. But it implies this shift that is happening and that can happen every time we make a choice. As designers, every time we make a design choice, we can choose whether to design for me, for ourselves, or for all of us. And as people, whenever we buy something, we can choose whether to, let's say, buy something for ourselves or for all of us. So this was my effort to explain to you food design, and we are at about maybe a bit more than half of the talk, more than half of the talk, and what I want to, this was my effort to explain to you how I see food design, but now I would like to, for you to tell us again, thank you, Aya, for sending the question, what do you think food design is now? So after I have explained to you the way I see food design, I want to see if your view has changed. So you guys are giving all your answers.
Perhaps we could also say that they can choose more than one this time.
Yep. Thank you, Aya. And so I am going to give you a moment to give this answer. And Aya, I'm going to drink a sip of water whenever you want to pause, whenever you want to finish with the poll, you let me know. And I'm going to let your ears rest for a little moment, guys.
Well, the answers are changing. Give it another 20 seconds. Here are the results.
Excellent. So I see that many of you have wrote down more than I thought. Excellent. That was the goal of this talk, basically, for me to see if I can make you see that food design is usually more than we think it is. So food design is color, texture, and form. Yes, we have seen a lot of examples of that. Food design is menus and recipes. This has gone up also. Creating new tableware and cutlery, this has gone up also. We see that now we consider also design for food as part of food design. Curating food spaces and experiences remains quite big, and developing new food system, excellent. And it's actually beautiful to see how you guys have answered this question with regards to, it's beautiful to see that so many of you think that food design is developing new food systems, because it tells me that you can see the value of food, and it's not common, guys, really. This is not a common type of audience. Most people in other audiences would not have given this answer. So this tells me really not only that you are all very well informed, but we are also that we are also all on the same line, and that you can see how every intervention that I can make within the world of design has an impact, has a bigger impact on the food system. So another, on this same line, another definition that I like to use for food design is that food design intervenes in the production, procurement, preservation, transportation, preparation, presentation, consumption, and disposal of food. So when we are doing food design, we can intervene at any of these levels. So as we move on to the final part of this presentation, I want to go back to food services a little bit, and in particular, I want to go back to restaurants just to give these examples. About 60% of restaurants close in 1 year, and about 80% of restaurants close in 5 years. So at the beginning of the talk, we asked you what is the #1 reason for cafes and restaurants to fail? And maybe we can see the answers are popping up here now. Location, lack of people management, poor promotion, bad food execution. We see that, sorry, most of these answers, more or less, they have the same amount of votes. And the one with most votes is lack of good ideas, which is actually the answer that I would give. So absolutely. And by the way, these are all correct answers. If you go and look at the literature, if you go and look at research, you will find lots of researchers telling you why restaurant fails because of their location, because of people management, because of poor promotion, etc. But there is very little research, if not no research at all, that tells you that restaurants fail because of, sorry, I'm just trying to close this. Restaurant fails because of lack of good ideas. Restaurant fails because of lack of good ideas means that you have been able to look around you and see that the restaurant that fails are the restaurants that say nothing, that really have nothing to say. They have no message, they have no soul very often, and that's, you know, why they fail. So if we have so many examples of food businesses that fail, and restaurants being probably the most, you know, talked about food service, we have this type of news, 80% of restaurants fail in 5 years, etc. We have very often this type of news. So the question then becomes, then how do I come up with great ideas, right? And I have basically dedicated my career so far in trying to answer this very question, which is so convenient because I'm here with you now talking about this. So how do I come up with great ideas? I'm sure this is the answer that you guys want as well. So there are two options. You either are taken over by what we call an aha moment, where a huge, brilliant idea just comes to you and you have no idea how it happens, but you feel it in your body, you're super excited about it, and you're just gonna go with it? Or you go and start some type of process that leads you to have a decent, if not great, idea, or an idea that is as great as possible. The thing is that for every time we do have a beautiful aha moment, we have about 100 moments where we do need to come up with ideas, and we need to go and we need to move quite quickly, and we need to do this repeatedly. Enter food design thinking. So food design thinking is this thing that you see here. It's a creative process for food designers. This is the results of the last, I think, 7 or 8 years of my research that started with my PhD and continued also with the experiences with companies, etc. So what I've done was putting together a process for food designers to come up with ideas. So if you consider all of food design thinking, as we saw it before, to me, food design thinking is this first part that takes you from having no idea what you're going to design, or a specific brief if you have it, and it takes you to where you have a good, final, robust concept, and it gets you ready to make it into reality. The process has 6 different phases. In the first one, you expand and explore you expand and define who you want to be as a change maker in the world. In the explore phase, you gather ideas. In the evaluate phase, you make sense of them. In the envision phase, you come up with ideas. In the experiment phase, you create a final concept, you prototype it, and the execute phase, you're ready to make it into reality. A very condensed explanation of what food design thinking is. So one question that I have very often is, what is the difference between design thinking and food design thinking? Well, very simply, food design thinking is a design thinking process for food designers. So it's a food specific design thinking process. And the food specificity is given by the methods themselves, what they accompany you to do. There are a few things that make food design thinking unique. I'm going to try and go quite quickly because I'm kind of conscious about time. But the most important probably is cohesiveness. So what is cohesiveness? What do we mean by cohesiveness? Every proposition, every product, or every service gives us a message through a specific language. Let me explain. A message is the meaning or the story of a product or service. The language is how that message is expressed through how the product or the service looks like, feels like, smells like, tastes like, etc. All the tangible elements in the service or product. A message is usually given through marketing or the product itself, really, in how it looks like. But it is about the impact that we want to have in the world. A language can be given by the whole service, by a specific vessel, for example, or by a food product. And what we want to achieve is cohesiveness between message and language. And food design thinking helps us to achieve that. Let me give you an example. This is Alice in Wonderland, and you might remember from the book that she drinks this drink me potion that makes her shrink. The potion tastes like, I think, like cherry pie first and roast turkey later, or something like it. Well, Heston Blumenthal was able to recreate a recipe, that recreates the 7 different flavors that Alice describes in the book. And so the message of this product is quite obvious, and the language is so cohesive with the message that allows people to have the same experience that Alice had. Another example is again Salvage Supper Club, where the message is about food waste, and the language cohesively conveys that message because you're eating food waste inside a food dumpster. We have an example from Okay, sorry, I was getting a message from Aya about timing. Okay, another example is Impossible Burgers, and we talked about it before. But what is the message here? Because the language, and this was on the right, my Instagram feed a few days ago, the language is, to me, I interpret it as, you know, something that looks like meat, but that is not meat. But it really looks like meat. So what is the message here? If the message is go vegan, then why is the language talking about meat? Why is the language referring to meat? Maybe the message is go vegan, but with the products that look like that you're going to have the experience of meat, but it's not meat. The point here is that this is only my opinion, and you might have a different opinion, but we can have different opinion on what the actual message of, for example, Impossible Burger is. And that is where confusion comes across, when you have a message that is interpreted differently by different people. So you see the importance of having a very clear message. So in design thinking, in food design thinking, we have a series of methods that actually direct us towards working on the message itself. And I want to give you an example, but maybe not, because we don't have a lot of time, but the very first method in food design thinking allows you, and these are the worksheets that I give to people where they can literally go through them step by step. This first message allows people to sit down and think, what inspires me? Who am I as a person? What contribution do I want to bring to the planet? How do I want to change the world? And remember, we talked about critical food design. Well, critical food design is the example of, within food design, the best example, let's say, within food design of products or services or events that always have a very strong message. So a method like this can help you design for a very strong message, because you define it at the very beginning of your process. And if we look at Aya's company, just because she is providing us a very good example, she conveys her message not just through the products themselves, but they also make experiences and workshops, actually events and workshops. And when people get together and they have a chance to have a conversation, to interact with one another, that is where a food business has a beautiful opportunity of conveying their message. Food design thinking is unique because it does push you or guide you to design for sustainability. And again, it does it with a few different methods. And I'm moving through this quite quickly now, sorry. And of course, we talk about, and we design for systems as well. And we use the circular food economy model within the process. And we talk about food systems, and we try and consider the food system in which we are intervening in different steps of the process. And this is one of the methods where really, again, the worksheet step by step allow you to think in terms of all the different, we call them nodes of a system, all the different components of a system. And then food design thinking is, I think, unique because of how it approaches empathy. And I want to talk about this a little bit because I think it's very important. So if you look at the whole of food design thinking, if we concentrate on just the explore and the evaluate phase, what is important here is the specific sequence of methods. On other general design thinking processes, you might do a series of methods for to find information, to do your research, but with no specific order. Here in food design thinking, I propose a very specific order for this method that allow food designers to go through different levels of empathy. The first method allows designers to experience cognitive empathy, which means understanding what people think and feel. the second part of the sequence allows for designers to experience emotional empathy. So not only understanding what people think and feel, but feeling what people feel as well. And finally, with the last portion of the methods, food designers get to experience compassionate empathy, which means that I understand what people think and feel so much, and I feel what they feel so much that I become moved to help. And it is when I get to design something because I am moved to help, to intervene in that context, helping people, that we achieve great design. So when we get the design for empathy, we could find examples like OHO, which is a series of biodegradable plastic that is so biodegradable that is edible as well. And they're showing us different contexts in which it can be used. When I design for empathy, when we design for empathy, we can see examples of people that in 44 hours put together a team of chef restaurants and businesses donating food in order to deliver nutritionally balanced food to homeless people during COVID, during the lockdown. If we design for empathy, we get to design for social bounding, which I think is the term that Mariah is going to use next week. And we get to design embracing what nature gives us. And we get to design for very important issues like food waste. And we get to design for circularity. And of course, we get to design for food systems. What happens, the most important thing that happens though when we do this is that we are shifting from a model of me designing for me to a model of me designing for all of us. And this is what I think food design thinking can bring a little bit of a contribution. Because food design thinking is for all those of us who do want to make this planet a better place. And my last message to you guys is that please, let's save this planet because it might be the only one with pizza. Thank you guys. So if you're interested in food design thinking, you can check out the online School of Food Design where there are a bunch of courses and access to the different books. And you can also follow me on my YouTube channel called Food Design Thinking. Motashak Awi. I hope I said it correctly.
That's perfect.
Thank you. Stop share.
Wow, thank you, Francesca. That was fantastic. It was an all-encompassing presentation. Like, it's really mind-expanding to see all of these propositions and possibilities. I find the invitation to this approach quite timely, as it encourages us to also think with our hearts and to think of a new future that is built around connection with others, with the earth, and with life, instead of separation and isolation. So thank you for reminding us of the different pillars of sustainability and for shifting from me to us. I hope the designers and food business owners here will take much of this into their practice. We had some questions coming in.
Yeah, and while I listened to you, I was looking at these messages in the chat, and really thank you all guys for the lovely words that you have already used for me. Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure getting to share these few minutes with you. Let's see if you guys have questions.
Yes, there are, and there has been great engagement. So how do I pronounce this name? Yui Liwi?
Hello, yeah. My name is Yu. Good evening. Thank you, Francesca, for your presentation. I have a question about your food design chart. I'm wondering why there isn't cooking design but eating design. because both of them are food processes where people can have very rich interactions with food. For instance, my master's final project, which is installation that offers a cooking experience about making fresh pasta to people. And how can we define this kind of cooking design project? And another example can be a creative cooking workshop, as the one you showed us in the end. Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you. That's actually it's a lovely perspective that you bring. I really like that. I think that the only reason why I might not have mentioned it in the visual thing is because I consider this type of, I personally group this type of contribution within food service design or event or eating design. So when they are organized, when, for example, cooking class is organized as a one-off event, then maybe in my mind, it goes into eating design. And so eating design for me is not only when I give somebody food, but also, as you mentioned rightfully, is when we can teach somebody about something about food. And instead, when I have a business that gives courses in making tortellini or wine tasting or whatever it is, that I put it into food service. But absolutely well it was actually very good for you to point it out and to remind us that there is all the teaching part that is also very important and beautiful, and I think important right now as a type of situation to create.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
There's also a question from Eric. Would you like to ask it directly?
Yeah, hi everyone. First of all, Francesca, thank you very much for this excellent overview, presentation and examples. As you all know, the world is suffering now from coronavirus pandemic situation. I would just want to ask you, Francesca, if you could please state some comments on how Corona is influencing food design and food businesses at present, and how can food design help food operators to survive this crisis?
Thank you so much. This is actually a very good point. Actually, I have given, I think 20 or 30 minutes presentation on how food design can help right now, and you can find it in my YouTube channel. That is though quite in a way, it's a general question. I mean, I think it can be taken as there can be some very practical thinking points, but it can consider a broad thing. Well, definitely the pandemic, or even more the lockdown, have influenced greatly the food business. In Italy, for example, where I live at the moment, the food businesses are the most impacted because the limitation has touched them more than other businesses, unfortunately. And I think my thought on it is basically that I'm worried. Yeah. Because not only we are talking about, people's income, but when you take away the possibility for people to give bits of themselves, those who are in the food business are doing that. Chefs are giving bits of themselves. You are really, I think, you risk to deplete people's creativity a lot. And when you take away the possibility to go out and share a meal with people, you are taking something very big out of, people's lives. So I am worried. What I think food design can do, though, in this moment is, of course, work within the regulations that we have, unless you want to do something more radical, but staying within the regulation. I think that the most important thing that we must all try and do is to create any type of connection that we can. And if it has to be virtual for a while, let's make it virtual. But I think that what food design has showed us that we are already that we can do is to create that connection, because food is connection first of all, and food designers are particularly sensitive, I think, to this topic. So the number one thing I would say, let's all try and do as much as possible is let's create connection. Mm-hmm. As far as my specific contribution is that I am actually organizing I think at least a couple of workshops just for chefs to come up with ideas, digital workshops where we all will be working in digital rooms together to come up with ideas for their own restaurant and for whatever they can do during this pandemic. And I'm going to release the information soon. And if you guys are subscribe to any of even the free courses in the online School of Food Design, you'll find out, or if you follow me on Instagram. But thank you for this question. It's very important that we actually.
Thank you so much, Francesca, and to all of you, stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
There's a question that I'm going to ask on behalf of Manal, and it says, what do you believe is the most effective method or approach in the light of the examples that have been mentioned in triggering radical change in food habits and daily choices for people who are outside the design field?
The most radical method or approach to create, to inspire?
One second. To inspire a change in food habits and daily choices.
I think that the answer to this type of questions, if you want the most radical, it's not a food design thinking method or an approach. Well, it's not a food design thinking method, but it's an approach, and that I think is critical food design. Critical food design is there to make people think. So whatever you can do within your business to create a situation, virtually, in person, whatever way you can possibly think of, that allow you to send a strong message, that when you have a strong message, you can have a strong impact and you can really change people's lives. I mean, I'm sure that for all of us, there has been that one documentary that changed our life or our perspective or something, or that one meeting that we went to where we met that person that said that one thing that changed our perspective on something. So I think critical food design is the branch of food design, the food design subdiscipline that can really help any type of food business in achieving something like that.
That's true. Lee Katz, would you like to ask your question? If not, we can skip and then come back to her. There's Vanessa Ladino.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry about it. I'm on mobile, so everything's a little wonky. It's lovely to hear from you. Thank you for your talk today. I've reached out and I'm very curious about your master's program in Milan, and maybe that's where the future will take me. I'm curious to ask you about food security in our urban systems. I'm a product design undergraduate student. I'm graduating this year, and I'm working on a project to do with urban agriculture and mushroom growing. And I'm wondering, what do you think are the most impactful ways we can use food design to drive food security in our most vulnerable populations?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not an expert on this branch of things. So my answer might not be what you are looking for. But in terms of what is the most effective tools that we can use, I really think that applying design or design thinking, or if you want food design thinking, to any problem can be extremely helpful. So any context in which you want to come up with a proposition, and I use the word proposition because I don't really like the word solution at times. So in any context for which you want to come up with a proposition, just general design thinking is the most useful tool, because it just allows basically lateral thinking, and it allows to look at problems or situation or context from a different perspective. So it's likely that you are already doing what I would advise you to do, since you are designing, since you are studying product design.
There's a really interesting question from Shahd, who would like to ask it herself.
Yeah. Hi, Francesca.
Hello.
I just wanted to thank you for all of this, and also mention that your diagrams were part of my thesis that I did for my master's degree. So it's kind of surreal that I'm getting to do this now with you. But the question I had is, I just graduated as a product designer, but my focus is geared towards food design, and I plan to work at a big food product corporation. But I've noticed, especially maybe I'm in Saudi Arabia, so I don't know if that also adds on to it, but they don't really, like in big food corporations, they're not aware of food design as much. And I just wanted to ask if you have any suggestions on how I can explain or educate them about this field, but without going overboard, and, you know, just kind of briefly.
Yeah, I completely understand where you are coming from. This is a question to which I haven't yet found the answer, but I can tell you that from my experience, indeed, companies, the bigger they are. So when you say I'm planning to work on a big company, is because you already have a job interview, you're already working in that company, or is that because or because that is just your general goal?
No, it's because I have an interview set up. It's not so much my biggest goal, but, you know, the first job getting out there.
Okay, good. So if you already have a foot inside the company because you have been hired to do something, then things are going to be, you know, easier. Because, you know, what I would advise you to do is just talk about it. It's just whenever you can demonstrate, show examples, and then slowly but surely demonstrate what food design can actually do. But for all those people who would like to work in food companies, but they are struggling to do that, yes, unfortunately, the bigger the company, the bigger the food company, the smaller is their view on what design in general can do, on what food design can do. And when we talk about food companies, bigger food companies really have never considered design. So we are talking, they never considered design, let alone food design. So we are really talking about going to giants, or, you know, big companies that have been doing things in a specific way for a long time. And we're going in and say, hey, let's do everything the way I'm going to show you. And because I've had that pleasure a couple of times, let's do everything in a way for which for 6 months to a year, you're not going to understand what you're going to do. But in the end, I promise that you will have a good result. Long story short, it's difficult. It's difficult to get food companies, the bigger the food companies, the more difficult it gets to understand what food design can do. My advice is to be persistent. If you are in the position of being somebody who is sending out CVs or answering to, you know, job application, sending out job applications, to just be persistent. What I think could help a lot in that journey to pursue your goal of going to work in such a company is to build your portfolio. So do as many food competitions as you can. Sorry, food design competition. Do as many design competition as you can, working on food projects if you have the chance to. Work on projects just because of the sake of you working on projects, and come up with things that you can take pictures on, that you can describe, and that you can put on your portfolio. So that when you get the opportunity, and then of course put all of that in social media, so that when you get the opportunity to have an interview with somebody, you can say, hey, this is what I've been doing, but if I were working with you, I would transform this into this, making it more coherent with what they do. So the advice is build your portfolio so you can show them visually what food design could do for them. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
And good luck.
I'm also going to ask a question on behalf of someone. And it says, how might we best create lasting change in our food systems? What separates lasting initiatives from temporary ones? What do you think are the most impactful ways we can support food security in urban centers?
Let me see if I can find this question. Can you put it in, can you copy and paste it in the chat room for me privately, so just so I see it, just because maybe it's lost somewhere. There are so many. Thank you guys for all these beautiful questions. So, and by the way, if we don't get through them all, please write to me on my Instagram, Food Design Thinking, or by email. So, okay, so thank you, Aya. So how might we best create lasting change in our food systems? Whenever we have a question that starts with how, related to doing something in the world of food design, my answer is always food design thinking, or any design thinking process. The how is always, for me, the answer to any how question, how can we do this? How can we best create lasting changes in our food systems, means putting yourself into a situation where you give yourselves a lot of tools to make sure that you investigate the system, that you have a strong message, as we were talking about before, and that you can design cohesively for that message. What separates lasting initiative from temporary ones? Unfortunately, yes, there are many food startups that, with great ideas. Food startups is where you find the best ideas ever, that don't make it past, you know, the initial steps, unfortunately. I think that to answer this question, what separates lasting initiatives from temporary ones, we have multiple answers. So the first answer would be, maybe the idea wasn't so great. But if you have a good idea, you know, we were talking about lack of good ideas. If you have a good idea, if you have a good, you know, proposition, the answer to this question, why might they not become lasting, but they become temporary? The answer may go into the field of business. And I am not a business person. So it might have to do with how you market yourself, with how much financial leverage you have in the beginning, how many supporters you have. This, unfortunately, in this world that we're living on right now, where, you know, we revolve around money, this type of consideration are very important. So I would suggest to anybody starting a food business, in a food startup, to yes, have a strong design basis, which means making sure that there is cohesion between a strong message and the language of your product or service or whatever, and then have some business knowledge as well. And this can happen easily when you start your adventure knowing that you will be collaborating with different people. I hope this answers the question. Thank you.
Rodrigo, would you like to ask your question directly?
Yeah, well, let's try. They stop the noise. So Francesca, I'm an architect, and then I started producing wine, and then I got into the food business. I studied some different courses and workshops and all that. but I'm finding it very hard to start here in my country. I live in Mexico. People think you're like some kind of magic guru consultant, but I would really like to change the way people think about food here, especially restaurateurs or people who are directly having an impact in the industry. Do you know any way, or which would be the correct way to grow in this business, or to start something up and make people listen?
Yes, very relevant question. Thank you, Rodrigo. So I have a couple of things that have come up. So the first thing that I would tell you is, again, maybe a result to critical food design, or in other words, create events where you, once you, starting from you having already a proposition, an idea, whatever it is, I would say the one thing is to create events where people can get together, where you can propose, give your message, and people get to discuss it and experience it, and then they get to share it on social media. So because I'm not, marketing is not, of course, my area of knowledge, my answer is different. But for sure, if you ask somebody who does digital marketing for a living, they would be telling you, have a strong social media presence. So that is for sure important as well. So the first thing that comes to mind, as I said, is to, I think, persist, because it's really, it's a struggle for everybody, and you have no idea how much I understand this position, because I hear a story like this very often. And so first of all, persist, because if you persist, if you believe in what you're doing, I am one of those people who believe that things will come. Then of course, create events, creates moments that can be shared, where your message can be talked about, discussed, and experienced by people. And then the other thing that came to mind, just because you said that you are from Mexico, is, but it applies to everybody, but it's find your, connect with like-minded people. And it came to mind because you're from Mexico, because I don't know if you have heard of the Red Latinoamericana de food design, or yeah. So it's written red, R-E-D, LATAF. Anyway, so you'll find Red Latinoamericana de food design, and you'll find it. And it came to mind because it's, you know, Mexico and being in Latin America, but anywhere you are in the world, guys, and have a similar question as Rodrigo's, find the group of people that speak your same language, and that helps you find opportunity to participate in events that bring together, let's say in this case, food designers, where there is opportunities for sharing and maybe co-designing, etc. So these are the two things that came to mind. I hope it helps.
Yes, thank you so much.
There's a very interesting question, actually, and it says, should I copy it and paste it to you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
I can also read it to the audience, and it says, you mentioned at the beginning the importance of collaboration in the food design field. What would be a dream collaboration that you haven't seen yet, but you believe would be a fruitful one?
Oh, wow, I have to think about this. Okay. A dream collaboration. I'm thinking if I want to go specific or generic. Okay, so the first answer that comes to mind, maybe because I am working in this field at the moment, is it's a generic type of collaboration. I would like to see a lot more collaboration between chefs and designers. Chefs have chefy knowledge, food knowledge. They know how to process food, how to cook food, make it beautiful, etc. And they don't have any design knowledge. I consider most chefs, those who create innovation, to be food designers, and they are not aware of it. So most chefs, not most chefs, some chefs, if you think about all the chefs in the world, many chefs think in terms of Michelin star, etc., etc. Those who really push the boundaries of what can be put on a plate, of what can be served in a restaurant, are doing design, but it's all a non-conscious design. It's all of a non-conscious process. Collaborating with a designer can bring that process into awareness. Actually, there are some chefs who do have a conscious creative process, but persistent, let's say, collaboration with designers can bring that process to awareness, and the amount of propositions of dishes that can be designed that have some type of innovation can increase. So one thing that I would like to see is a chef in every restaurant, or, you know, a chef in any food product design endeavor. And that is a general one. But I'm thinking that I have to think about this, because I'm thinking in terms of a specific collaboration, like between two actual people. And I have a couple of ideas, but you know what, I will think about it and then I'll post it at some point on my Instagram.
Nice.
Or something like that.
Francisco, would you like to ask your question?
Hello. Do you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So thank you all for this. So my question is, as food design thinking is a multidisciplinary methodology, sometimes it has been perceived as an impossible methodology, because in my case, it involves agriculture, design, space design, menu, interaction between the cookers, the service, the space, etc. We all know. So it's a lot to handle. So how does, in your experience, how it is perceived by the people around you, in your beginnings, or in right now, or I don't know.
Do you mean food design thinking as a creative process, or food design as a discipline?
Wow, that's a good question. Wow, as a process, I think.
Okay. Then the question, the answer is a bit easier. Food design thinking, the way I use this term, right? If you Google food design thinking, you will find other people using the term in other ways, and I don't have the copyright for the use of this term. It makes no sense for me to give copyrights to words, but food design thinking, the way I see it, the way I've created it, it's a creative process. So you use it when you want to come up with a proposition. Food design is huge, it can be potentially huge, but I think that, first of all, food design thinking, as well as other general design thinking processes, is there exactly to help people to handle complexity. So if you have a big brief, like, I don't know, design happy food, you know, you could be anything. What am I going to do? Where do I start my research? Am I going to design food? Am I going to intervene in the system, etc.? If you have a huge brief, then using food design, something like food design thinking, you're going to have different steps that are going to tell you, now do this, then do the other thing, and then do the other thing. And things usually make sense and they unravel themselves. And in the end, you're able to have a big picture or something that is quite complex, the context that you are investigating. But because of you approached it step by step from different angles, It has a way of making sense. The thing is that if you have a very broad brief, then my advice would be to have a very broad time frame. And if you have a small, very specific brief, then you can have a very small time frame, which means if you have to design for happiness, make sure you have at least 6 months to do that. If your brief is redesign the font of my menu in my restaurant, then you can do that in a couple of weeks, okay? Having said that, I'm saying this because it's very important to give this process an appropriate amount of time. And it might seem obvious, but I assure you that for some companies, it's not. For some companies, they want everything done in 1 month or, you know, or a week or something. So whatever is your endeavor, first, make sure you have enough time. Then the other thing is, if you do have a brief that is, let's say, more general, that makes you kind of scared of the fact that you will have to learn everything about the system, and maybe the system that I'm operating within includes knowledge about agriculture and policy making and whatnot. If you do have a situation like that, the second huge thing that you have to remember is that you don't have to do it alone. Food design thinking, I think, all of design actually, it's not a solitary action. It's done usually by a group of people. And when you have between 3 and 5 people are magic numbers, I would say. And altogether you approach whatever context that might seem huge and scary. And you have a process that is going to tell you step by step where to look at, things can become very manageable, absolutely. One advice, if you are in, let's say that you are in the situation right now where you maybe have a project in mind, but it does seem like it could be about anything. If you are in that situation, make sure that your decisions are led by your heart, not your head. So make sure that you start the project because of the passion that you feel on a certain context that you want to investigate. And make sure that you start your project because of the message that you want your whatever proposition to convey in the end. If you have that drive, like I know how I want to change the world, I believe that with the right tools and the right team and the right amount of time, it can happen. I hope that helped.
Thank you so much. Oh no, it helped a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we need to wrap up.
Wow, it's 8 p.m. Oh, it's 8 for me.
Yeah, but this has been great. I love the engagement, the questions, the answers, everything has been great. Lovis, you agree? And Amir?
Sorry, I was chatting. What did you say?
Yeah,
thank you so much. This was amazing. And thank you, everybody, for this great engagement as well.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Really, it's a great honor to have everyone here. Really, also like opening the floor for everyone to network. I mean, it's the core of having businesses is to network, and especially for food designers in this kind of niche design market, it's very important now more than ever to have this kind of platform where we have people really just engaging, networking, and then getting to know each other for whatever ideas they have. This is exactly why we have these series. So yeah, thank you for your engagement. It's important.
Yeah, thank you, Amir and Lovis, for organizing this event, and Dr. Francesca for sharing the amazing work and insights. Just before we wrap up, I would like to bring everyone's attention to the upcoming food feature titled Eating Design as a Social Bonding Tool by Maria Vogelsang, next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Amman time. And also, if anyone is interested, there's a cool event happening tomorrow where Professor Charles Spence will be a guest speaker. And the event name is Rethinking Eating, Digital and Immersive Experiences. So I'm going to share with you all the website for anyone who is interested. And I guess that's it for today.
Thank you so much for your moderation, Aya. And if anybody, we're just going to stay a few more minutes because we're already late, but if anybody else wants to ask while leaving any other questions that they were shy to ask before, just turn on your microphone if you want to, or just say bye. And it was a pleasure to have you all, and thank you so much, Francesca, for this amazing talk. Also, this, the engagement and the question were amazing.
Thank you, Lovis, and thank you, everybody.